Welcome to the 28 Storms Tropical Weather Update for Thursday, July 7th. Although convection remains widely disorganized across much of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, the National Hurricane Center has increased the probability of tropical development to 20% within the next 48 hours, and this disturbance has also been classified as 96L Invest, simply meaning that the Hurricane Center is taking a bit of a closer look today. Also, as predicted, they've highlighted the tropical wave that's about to exit the intertropical convergence zone. They give this feature about a 10% chance of development within the next 2 days. And also, we have newly formed Tropical Depression 3E in the eastern Pacific, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that first. Here are the latest official stats on Tropical Depression 3. Maximum sustained winds are now 35 miles per hour. It's almost a tropical storm, and it's expected to become one later today. It's moving toward the west-northwest at 13 miles per hour, and as you can see, it's expected to remain well off the coast of Mexico as it continues in a west-northwest fashion into the eastern Pacific, where it's expected to begin dissipating by late this weekend. This is the latest floater imagery, and as you can see, the tropical depression has become much more organized over the last 24 hours. We now see some convection beginning to develop directly over the center. If you recall, yesterday all of the convection was displaced to the west of the low-level center, and the center is estimated to be somewhere around this latest ball of convection here, so we've seen a fairly good increase in organization. And again, the moisture profile looks fairly good. If anything, we still see some very slight easterly shear. That's the reason why it's still a bit lopsided to the west, but again, overall this is organized enough to now be considered a tropical depression. The latest SIMS wind shear analysis still confirms some very light easterly wind shear. This is the location of our tropical depression, and you can see what's going on a little bit better here. The tropical depression is a bit cut off from the screen, but it's now beginning to enter in this general area, and it's now approaching the western periphery of the upper level ridge, which will mean that over the next 2 to 3 days it will begin to encounter more southwest shear aloft. So overall, this is not the most unfavorable environment, but slow intensification is still possible. Even if TD3 were to intensify, we still have a persistent subtropical ridge over much of lower Texas and mainland Mexico, which is going to guarantee that this system will continue toward the west-northwest out into the open water. This is being confirmed by all the available model guidance. As you can see, not a single model turns this storm more toward Mexico. This is just a more regional view of the storm. Again, it's just now beginning to enter this sector of the eastern Pacific. And as you can see, the storm looks fairly well defined today, although if you look at the latest water vapor imagery, you get the idea that it's being protected by an upper level ridge beginning to enter the screen. But as this system continues to move off toward the west-northwest, it's going to begin encountering a bit more southwest shear and dry air, not to mention cooler sea surface temperatures. So as of right now, it looks like this system will max out at nothing more than about a 50 to 55 mile per hour tropical storm, and its lifespan will be relatively short, and it will not be impacting anyone directly. Switching gears to the Atlantic very quickly, here is the newly formed 96L Invest located in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. We'll take a much more detailed look in a moment. But also here's that tropical wave now that's about to separate itself from the intertropical convergence zone. Much of it is about to run aground over here along the northern coast of South America, but we do expect some clips of the energy to begin making its way into the extreme southern and southwest Caribbean. None of the models show development, but that will be one feature that we will track for the next 5 to 8 days. Again, here's the latest infrared imagery. As you can see, much of that convection along the Gulf of Mexico is very disorganized today, and this is some convection related to an unfavorable trough over much of the Caribbean, so we're not expecting anything there. And once again, here is our tropical wave that is about to run into a very unfavorable environment. As you can see, that aforementioned trough is entrenched well into the eastern Caribbean, and it's producing about 50 knots of vertical wind shear, so we're not expecting anything from this tropical wave as it continues to move toward the southern Caribbean. If it's going to do anything at all, it's going to be in the medium range over here in the western Caribbean, southern Bay of Campeche, or possibly even the eastern Pacific, but the jury is still out on that one. Here is a more detailed look of 96L Invest. As you can see, it's elongated from south to north, due to the fact that we still have a persistent upper-level low located just to the southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana, and that's funneling in not only a lot of dry air, but a lot of vertical wind shear. Although it is a bit interesting today to see that near about 25 degrees north and 86 degrees west, we do see hints of a very weak low-level exposed circulation trying to develop here. And if anything is going to form, it may be from that very weak area of surface low pressure, as also indicated by the Tropical Analysis Forecast branch Overall, I'm still not expecting much due to the presence of this upper low, but it's not unheard of to possibly get some type of subtropical or hybrid development with upper level lows currently in place. Again, I'm really not expecting that. This looks way too disorganized, and that upper level low is a bit too non-tropical for my liking. These are the latest surface observations from the southeast Gulf of Mexico, and you can at least make out a very weak surface trough noted by the wind barbs and the wind directions in this general location. And this is the result of things. We see that Florida is getting some much needed rainfall. Not only do we have the daily sea breeze, but it's also being enhanced a bit by this feature located very close to the state. But we're also getting that Caribbean moisture going straight into Florida that's really helping to aid in the rainfall development. And I've looked at some of the latest forecasts from the National Weather Service offices along the central Gulf Coast. They only keep the forecast for rain at about 30 to 40% throughout the period, although I wouldn't be completely shocked if those were bumped up just a little bit. I'm not expecting anything torrential or anything too much out of the ordinary, but I would not be surprised if this system eventually wraps some more of its moisture up toward your location. Here is the latest tropical model suite plot, and as you can see, all the models take the very weak area of low pressure near the surface up toward the Florida Panhandle. This upper level low is expected to continue drifting more toward the west-northwest, and as a result, the associated trough along with it, along with the surface area of low pressure, should spread a bit more toward the north-northwest or northwest. So once again, the central Gulf Coast may anticipate a bit more elevated rainfall chances than average or what is currently indicated. This is the latest 12Z Canadian CMC run. As you can see, it doesn't show any development in the Gulf of Mexico, but if you notice, by the end of the forecast period, the tropical wave that is approaching the Windward Islands is forecast to make it into the southern half of the Yucatan Peninsula, where it makes itself known a little bit more. And if this run were to verify, that would be very reminiscent of Tropical Storm Arlene's track before it got into the lower Gulf of Mexico and Bay of Campeche. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but this is the solution being advertised by the Canadian CMC 12Z forecast. The 12Z GFS is a bit similar, but just a little less aggressive. It agrees that nothing is going to develop in the Gulf of Mexico, but if we notice toward the very end of this solution, we begin to see a lowering of surface pressures over the Yucatan Peninsula and eventually the Bay of Campeche. So much like the Canadian is bringing this tropical wave all the way across, and then it begins to lower the surface pressures down here surrounding the Yucatan. The 12Z European has a slightly different take on things. It does agree that nothing is going to happen in the basin within the first 5 days or so, but around day 5 you do begin to see more of a broad area of low pressure, very similar to the monsoonal type low that developed Tropical Storm Arlene. And by day 6, 7, and 8, especially by day 8, you begin to see that it's focusing more of the energy, simply put, on the eastern Pacific side of Mexico versus the Gulf of Mexico. And, you know, this is a very realistic solution as well. But the bottom line is the models are lowering pressures here across Central America. So this whole entire region will be the place to watch down the road. So just to sum things up for you, tropical development is not expected in the Gulf of Mexico. We cannot completely rule out a hybrid system, although from my personal point of view, I don't think it's going to happen. Either way, the system is going to bring an enhanced risk of rainfall across much of the state of Florida, possibly extending into the central Gulf Coast states. And further toward the south, that tropical wave will be entering the Caribbean within the next 48 hours, but it's not going to do anything over the central or eastern Caribbean due to the strong wind shear. If it's going to do anything, it's going to be as it nears the Yucatan Peninsula, much like Arlene did. I'm not saying it's going to be the next Arlene. The energy can easily go into the eastern Pacific this time around. But if anything is to be watched over the medium range, it will be that feature. And of course, we have Tropical Depression 3 that is formed out in the eastern Pacific, but it is no threat, or at least no direct threat, to any land masses. So that's your tropical weather update from 28storms.com for this Thursday. Please check again tomorrow afternoon for another video.